Welcome to Sit Down News. I hope everyone's enjoying their night. I hope you all had a good day. So before I begin, let me just give a shout out to Ratchet Clothing. Ratchet is a company out of the UK. They deal with organically grown clothing, and they use a method to tie dye and other methods of printing as well. I'm going to put a link down below. You could go on their website and check out what they have. They added a bunch of new items. I am still waiting for the package that they're sending me. And once I receive that, you'll see me wearing their shirts. So I'm going to review season 1, episode 4 of The Sopranos. I've been doing it little by little, and I'm getting there. And, hopefully everyone's enjoying it. So in the opening scene, they show you Tony Soprano again. Well, what we don't know is a dream at the time, but he's walking around Dr. Melfi's office. That's his psychiatrist. And he's seen various people in his life who's sitting in the waiting room, some of his crew. And ultimately, I think he goes over to who he thinks is Dr. Melfi and turns the chair around, and it happens to be his mother sitting at her desk. So I think that it's his subconscious, very concerned about people in his life finding out that he's going to therapy. That was just my opinion on it. And next we have this Christopher, who gets discharged from the hospital, and he's wearing a neck brace. His girl is coming to pick him up, and he seems very uneasy about going out into the parking lot. He still believes that Tony Soprano was behind his abduction and the beating that he received. So he wants to go over to check in on his friend Brendan. I think he mentioned something about getting drugs. So obviously, news to me, I didn't know that they were doing drugs. And they find Brendan's body in the bathtub, and that's how we kind of left off on the last episode, where Brendan gets shot and killed in his apartment in his bathtub. And now he panics, and he wants his girlfriend to take him to go look for Tony Soprano's daughter, this Meadow, and he questions her and accuses her of telling her father, and she assures him that she never told her father about the drugs. And Meadow's brother, AJ, gets into a fight with a former friend of his, this kid, Jeremy Piacosta, and it happens in a school hallway. And in the interim of the fight, he winds up getting a shirt ripped off, the neck ripped off, and later is questioned by his mother, and he confesses to the fight, and she explains that the grandmother bought the shirt, and he apologizes and ultimately says that he's going to perform some chores to pay for the shirt, which costs $40. A second fight happens between AJ and this kid Jeremy again, and at that point, AJ is requesting that the kid give him the $40. The kid says he's not paying for the shirt. Natural among kids, and they get into another fight. I talk about that it kind of was a premonition to his dream, because in one scene, Tony Soprano is going into or walking into a medical building where Dr. Melfi obviously has her office, and he almost runs into Silvio, who I believe is talking with a dentist office or something like that. And he's clearly shaken. So once he goes into his therapy session, he tells Dr. Melfi about his security concerns. And he tells her, just my being here incriminates me. So basically, he knows that he really shouldn't be in therapy, and that how it's looked upon in that life by other people. And I guess that would be the case in real life as well. So with this in mind, he now kind of reverses roles, and he now wants to question his therapist about her life. He's changing it up a little bit. And she basically responds in a way that A, makes him chuckle and get a laugh, and B, kind of calms him down, because I think he respected her answer. And she basically told him I'd have to take the fifth on that. After that, he's seen visiting his mother another visit that doesn't go well. I don't know what the animosity is between his mother and himself. I'm new to watching it, and I guess we'll find out. But there's always seems to be some kind of head bumping between him and his mother. But on the way out, he runs into a crooked lieutenant that obviously, as I wrote, is on the pad, means on his payroll, and he asks that lieutenant to find out anything he could about Dr. Melfi. And at one point, the lieutenant finds out that the doctor is seeing a psychiatrist as well for her own personal reasons. And then he and his partner follow the doctor and her date, and they pull them over, and he interrogates the guy a little bit, and then winds up attacking the guy and giving the guy a beating. I think he even locks him up. And they show that the Dr. Melfi is very upset and visibly upset, and a little far-fetched, that they could just pull a guy over and start beating him up like that. Not that it doesn't happen, but to me, it was a little far-fetched. So as Tony Soprano and his crew are at bedside with their boss, Jackie, who we know is in the hospital dying of cancer, Christopher barges in and he breaks the news about Brendan's murder. And without delay, Tony Soprano right away pins it and says, "Fucking Uncle Junior." And this Christopher is insisting on going after this Mikey Palmisi, who is the guy who did the shooting and is known to do the shooting for June Soprano. But Tony Soprano gives him a stern warning, that he can't do anything like that because the guy's a made guy. That's an accurate scene. For those of you who don't know, in that life, somebody who is made, or as we would say, straightened out, is kind of hands off. Nobody should put their hands on them. The law and the rule is if you did put your hands on a made guy, you can lose your life for that. So Tony Soprano is taking matters in his own hands. He leaves that group and he shoots over to obviously where his Uncle Junior hangs out, and he catches this Mikey Palmesi in a car. The guy gets out of the car and he winds up giving him a crack to the face. He knocks him down and he proceeds to give him a beating while he's on the floor. And he also takes out a stapler. And many of you, now I know what you're talking about, because there was a blog that I wrote just recently that had to do with a stapler, though I didn't use it. A lot of people made reference to some scene, and now I know the scene that you're talking about. But Tony Soprano, actually takes the stapler out and shoots a couple of staples into this Mikey's chest. And then he heads over to, I think it's a luncheonette, and he confronts his uncle, which is Junior Soprano. And he basically tells him, are we going to stop this before this gets out of hand? And Junior Soprano answers him back and says, "I'm sitting here like a patient on a monument, waiting for discipline to be handed down." And then he ultimately tells him that he answers to bigger people. And what he's basically telling him is that obviously they're both in captain positions, and that they both answer to somebody in the administration or the administration itself as a whole. And he gives his nephew a final threat and tells him, next time you come in here, you make sure you come in heavy and not at all. And what he's talking about is, as we would say in the street, strapped up or with a pistol. So I title the next paragraph Politics. And in light of the acting boss Jackie's deteriorating health, Tony Soprano is seen sitting at a table with, I believe, his other captains in the family, and they're really discussing who's going to be Jackie's successor and who's going to take the position. And I would have to say that scene is pretty accurate. It would be the captains and the remaining members of the administration that would discuss, who's going to fill that void of an acting boss. I'm sorry. And during the discussion, it's suggested by one or two of the guys that Tony Soprano fill the position. And I wrote that he wisely steers himself away from accepting that title. And we'll see more on that later. So, but there is mention, and it's very important, that someone mentions that Junior is backed by New York. And I wrote that it's kind of a significant dialogue confirming the influence that New York has over New Jersey in these matters. And that's a true fact. So the next scene shows Tony Soprano at a plant nursery, and he's buying certain items. And he looks up and he sees this Jeremy's father, who I think that their families were once friends or something like that. And he kind of invites the guy out to dinner and says that they got to get together. The guy obviously is aware of these two kids fighting and having these fights, where Tony Soprano is not. And he's looking at Tony Soprano, who has an axe in his hand, and the guy's actually just buying it, I guess, for his own house. And he takes that that invitation as a threat, and he kind of takes off out of there. And in light of that, there was another get together that was supposed to be a fight between Tony Soprano's son and his kid Jeremy, I think on some kind of baseball field. And instead of fighting him, this kid Jeremy pays him the $40. And it's very apparent that the father must have grabbed the son and told him, pay him what you got to pay him. I want no part of it. You don't want to tangle with Tony Soprano. And of course, in real life, I'm sure the same thing would happen. And as a result of that, AJ is confused by this kid Jeremy's change of heart to pay him the money. And he turns to his sister Meadow, and he's trying to make sense of it. And she turns around and takes him over to a computer and shows him some mob website that I guess is going to have his father and their family in there, and tells him to read it. And she obviously knows about her father. And at one point, there's a lot going on again. And to no surprise, Tony Soprano falls out and he collapses in his kitchen, another panic attack. And his wife comes to his aid, helps him up. But he explains to her that he's thinking about quitting therapy. And she turns around and tells him, if you give up now, I'm going to have to reevaluate things, obviously talking about their marriage. So she's obviously not happy about the marriage for some reason. I don't know exactly what's going on yet. And he's telling her that this therapy is too much exposure for him. So, it's obvious from his dreams and a couple of times he walked out on this Dr. Melfi that he kind of knows he shouldn't be there. And he's kind of internally fighting with himself that he should really not be in therapy, but I guess part of him feels it's helping him and he's conflicted. And she turns around and also gives this guy a threat. He's getting threatened by everybody. And she tells him, well, then you're going to have to live with the results, kind of like a threat that if you quit therapy and the marriage goes under, it's your fault. And the next scene, he obviously took heed to her threat because he's back in therapy and he's explaining different things to his doctor, Dr. Melfi, and she now prescribes him Xanax to calm down his nerves. And later on in this strip club, I'm not 100% sure of the name of it, and they obviously got a piece of the club, and he's seen taking what I assume to be out of a bottle of Xanax, and his attention is grabbed by a news report that comes over the TV announcing the death of Jackie Aprile, which is their acting boss. And of course, the crew comes together and they're all upset, and they show you them having a toast to Jackie, which would be accurate. I think any one of us, whether you're in the mob or not, is going to kind of remember your friend or whoever it is that passed away. But as I wrote, in the center of all this drama and obviously bad timing, this Christopher later comes in on these guys remembering their boss. But before that, he approaches some street drug dealer that obviously he was shaking down. And he's told by the guy that his cut went to Junior Soprano. As a result of hearing this, he winds up grabbing the guy, attacking him. You know, he gives him a couple of shots, he threatens him, and he actually takes whatever money he has out of the guy's pocket. He then goes over to the strip club, and this is when he walks in and when he has this bad timing, and he starts to tell them about, you know, Junior's latest move that he pulled with the drug dealer. And as I wrote, the crew is trying to, in a nonchalant way, tell him now's not the time, and he's not listening to them. He's not the brightest bulb. And he basically tells Tony Soprano, if you don't do something, I got to question your leadership. And I could tell you that if he ever told the captain that, especially at any time, but especially during a time like that, he would definitely have a heavy price to pay. And accordingly, Tony Soprano grabs him by his neck brace and is trying to choke him and tells him, "You ungrateful little fuck. Where do you get the balls to question my leadership?" And as I said, he would definitely in real life have a problem with that scenario. So the death of this Jackie obviously puts a void in the position and leaves a power vacuum within the family. And at this time, Tony Soprano decides to go back to speak to his uncle, this Junior Soprano. This time he does, as Junior says, come heavy, or as we would say, he goes in strapped up with a pistol. And you could see that they're obviously on edge when he walks in, and obviously Junior is, until Tony Soprano announces that they, meaning himself and probably the other captains of the family, would like to put Junior in a position of acting boss and to take over this guy Jackie's position. But with one stipulation, that he, I guess, takes control over this Bloomfield, New Jersey, and some paving union, which obviously I wrote that Junior's very happy to have this new title, and he agrees to that, but he's not really questioning why his nephew is so easily giving up this position of taking over. And shame on him. So they show you Tony Soprano back in therapy, and she is now openly and freely speaking about her life, and actually goes into details about the assault that just took place on her boyfriend. And mistakenly, Tony Soprano blurts out "fucking moron," and he's talking about the lieutenant, and obviously the lieutenant is on his payroll, and he senses that she's a little puzzled by that, but he quickly covers up his mistake. And she's apologizing for being unprofessional. And she asks him now if he's still considering discontinuing going to therapy. And he tells her with this little sneaky smile that he made a decision to give therapy another chance. And now, near the end, we see them all, the whole Tony Soprano, the crew, Junior's crew, and they're all at Jackie's funeral, and Junior's off to the side, and his crew is kind of discussing the new position that Junior just been placed in. And Tony Soprano assures them he's got the title. He said he's a happy fucking camper and the house is secure. So he's basically kind of telling them that let Junior think he has the position, but behind the scenes, I'm going to run this thing, which strategically is a good move, because the law enforcement and the FBI, the biggest bullseye is going to be on Junior Soprano's back, not really Tony Soprano. Although he has a bullseye, he's not going to be as big as a target as someone in that kind of position that his uncle was in. So it was a strategic move on his part. And one that happens a lot, as many of you, as you guys know, the West Side, or as you guys know them, the Genovese family, they are very secretive as to who their boss is, and they put panels and different people in positions, which kind of at times confuses most people in the mob, and at times law enforcement as well. The scene ends with his son AJ kind of sitting off in the distance, watching his father interact with his crew, but also watching off in the distance the FBI taking surveillance pictures. And I wrote, in case he needed more understanding, his sister Meadow is seen at the very end, looking at him, kind of smirking and shaking her head like, I told you so. And that's really the end of it. I hope you guys are enjoying the review. I'll put a link down for those of you who have not read the blog on Sit Down News. And that's about it. I hope you enjoy the rest of your night. I appreciate everyone that's been subscribing to the channel. The subscribers are going up, and I do appreciate that. I appreciate everyone subscribing to the Unlimited Substance podcast as well. You could go on that channel and do that. Once again, I'll give another shout out, Ratchet Clothing. I'm going to put a link down below for anyone who wants to go on their website and check out what they have. And that's about it. I hope you enjoyed it. Ciao for now.